great. This is not great. The implications of the potential new CBA deal, if they took the deal right now on the Indiana Fever roster. And I did a video earlier. We talked about things like the implications of a delayed season on the Indiana Fever, etc. This is a bigger issue. This is a personnel situation.
That's the sound of a championship window potentially slamming shut before it ever fully opened. Robin Lundberg just dropped an analysis that has Indiana Fever fans in full panic mode. And honestly, they should be concerned, because what's coming with the new CBA isn't just a minor roster adjustment. We're talking about a salary cap structure that could force the Fever to choose between keeping their core together or watching two of their most beloved players walk out the door. Here's what makes this particularly brutal. The Fever just had one of the most exciting seasons in WNBA history. Caitlin Clark's rookie year brought unprecedented attention, sold-out arenas, and a playoff appearance. The chemistry was there, the roster clicked, fans were already planning championship parades, and now, before they can even run it back, the financial reality of the new collective bargaining agreement is about to tear this team apart.
Could put Lexie Hull and Sophie Cunningham on the outside of the Fever looking in. It could cause them to have to go to other teams. And we're talking about two massive fan favorites. And I'm just going to say it. What do you do here? What do you do? Are you going to lose two players for one? Because that's what it sounds like.
Let's break down exactly what's happening here, because the numbers are staggering. Under the proposed CBA, the salary cap jumps to $5.65 million. Sounds generous, right? More money for everyone. But here's the catch that nobody saw coming. Max contracts are expected to hit $1 million annually. The average player salary is projected to approach $500,000. And when you start doing the math on what it costs to keep Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and Aaliyah Boston together, the entire roster structure collapses. Amy Costable from Front Office Sports ran the numbers, using the Fever as her primary example. And what she found should terrify Indiana's front office. If Kelsey Mitchell gets the Supermax contract she's earned as a free agent this offseason, her salary quadruples from $250,000 to $1 million. Combined with Clark and Boston's current contracts, that leaves Indiana with less than the average player salary to fill out the remaining roster spots. Not less than ideal money, less than average. We're talking about trying to build championship depth with bargain bin pricing.
Two gargantuan pieces of the roster that would be out. The Indiana Fever have one of the most star-studded rosters in the WNBA, but it will be a challenge for the franchise to keep its core together going forward. This stems from looming changes to the WNBA salary structure and the reality that cornerstone pieces Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston will eventually move on from their rookie contracts. It's my understanding Aaliyah Boston's salary is going to go way up, too. And that could end up being a real issue.
Now we get to the heart of the crisis. Lexie Hull and Sophie Cunningham, two players who aren't just roster fillers. These are fan favorites who became essential pieces of what made last season special. Lexie Hull is a restricted free agent, which means Indiana can match any offer she receives from another team. But here's the problem. Her hustle, her three-point shooting, her defensive intensity, that's worth more than an average contract. She's going to command real money. Sophie Cunningham has been even more vocal about her future. She's made it clear she wants to stay in Indiana. She loves the team, the fans, the direction of the franchise, but she's also been explicit about wanting a more secure contract, not a one-year prove-it deal, real security, and that costs money the Fever might not have. So let's be blunt about what's actually happening here. The new CBA, which is supposed to be this massive win for WNBA players, is about to force Indiana to choose between keeping one max player or keeping the role players who made their core stars successful. That's not a win. That's a nightmare scenario disguised as progress.
Earlier, I did not do a video on it because some of the things in there we've already talked about at great length. But once I saw how this is going to break down, the implications of it on the Fever, I was like, yeah, let's do a video on it. Broke down the numbers in the league's existing proposal, citing the Fever as an example given Kelsey Mitchell's free agency and likely Supermax contract salary. As Constable noted, if Mitchell were to receive the new max,
But wait, because it gets worse. Much worse. Right now, Indiana has a temporary advantage. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston are both on rookie-scale contracts. Clark's deal runs through the 2027 season. Boston's contract ends after next season, after the 2026 campaign. Those below-market salaries are the only reason the Fever can even consider keeping three max-level players together in the short term. Except here's what everyone's missing. Aaliyah Boston's extension is coming up fast. After next season, she's eligible for a Supermax contract, and she's absolutely going to get it. She's a former #1 overall pick who's already proven she's a foundational piece. The proposed CBA sets Supermax contracts at 20% of the salary cap. Do that math. 20% of $5.65 million is over $1 million annually. So by 2027, when Caitlin Clark's rookie deal expires, Indiana is staring down a scenario where they'd need to pay three players over $3 million combined just to keep their core intact. That leaves roughly $2.5 million to fill out 9 more roster spots. And remember, the average salary is projected at $500,000. You can't build depth when you can only afford 5 average players total.
Only Clark, Boston, and last year's rookie Michaela Timpson are currently under contract, which means key contributors like Lexie Hull and Sophie Cunningham will also be on the market. Hull is a restricted free agent, which means Indiana can match any offers she receives, but her hustle and shooting has proven to be worth more than an average player, while Cunningham, who has made it clear she hopes to be back with the team, has also expressed desire for a more secure contract.
This is where the implications of last season's injury-plagued campaign become absolutely crushing. Think about what the Fever missed out on. They made the playoffs despite Caitlin Clark dealing with an ear injury that affected her equilibrium for weeks. They fought through it, showed resilience, built chemistry under adverse conditions, but they didn't win a championship. They didn't even make the WNBA finals. And now that window is closing faster than anyone anticipated. Because if they had won it all last year, if they'd captured a title with this exact roster construction, at least they'd have a championship banner to show for it before the financial reality forced them to break it up. Instead, they're facing a future where the best version of this team might never get another chance to compete together. The cruel irony is that Caitlin Clark's rookie contract, which seemed like such a bargain for Indiana, might actually accelerate the timeline for this roster's collapse. She's underpaid right now, which creates short-term flexibility, but when her extension comes due in 2027, she's getting a Supermax deal. There's no universe where the most marketable player in WNBA history takes a discount, nor should she.
Salaries, which is the equivalent of 20% of the cap in the proposed deal. Even if that percentage comes down, keeping 3 max players and still having room to field a representative roster appears unlikely, given what we know about how the CBA looks. Wow. So it sounds like, man, that tells you how big of a loss it was to have not had Caitlin Clark last year healthy for this team, because this team's not going to look the same now. It's not. Basically, what Robin just told you is you can't keep Lexie and Sophie.
Let's talk about what this means in practical terms. Right now, today, the Indiana Fever have only 4 players under contract for next season. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and last year's rookie Michaela Timmons. That's it. Everyone else is a free agent or has a team option that needs to be exercised. Kelsey Mitchell is the biggest domino. She's an unrestricted free agent who just had one of the best seasons of her career. She averaged over 17 points per game, proved she could coexist with Caitlin Clark despite early questions about fit, and showed she's still in her prime at 28 years old. If Indiana doesn't offer her the max, another team absolutely will. Dallas, Seattle, Los Angeles. There are multiple franchises with cap space and a desperate need for elite scoring, so Indiana basically has no choice. They have to max out Kelsey Mitchell. Losing her would be franchise malpractice, but keeping her triggers this entire cascade of roster problems. Because once that max contract is locked in, once you're committed to paying Mitchell, Clark, and Boston over $3 million combined, you're operating with championship aspirations but role-player budgets.
Caitlin, Aaliyah Boston, Michaela Tim. Hell, that's 4 players. And you got to figure Lexie's going to get more than an average contract. And then Sophie's going to get something at least slightly above average. Oh, the Indiana Fever may have an issue here. They may have to make a choice here, because it looks to me like when you peel back all the layers, what this article, what this breakdown tells you is you're not keeping 3 max players.
Here's the prediction that makes the most sense given everything we know. Indiana resigns Kelsey Mitchell to a max contract. They match whatever offer Lexie Hull receives as a restricted free agent, even if it stretches their budget. And Sophie Cunningham walks. She signs with another team that can offer her the security and the role she's earned. That's the least painful version of this scenario. And it's still devastating for Fever fans. Because Sophie wasn't just a solid rotation player. She brought energy, toughness, veteran leadership, and clutch shooting. She was the player who'd hit a big three when the offense stalled. She was the one who'd take a charge or dive for a loose ball when the game was on the line. Those intangibles don't show up in basic stats, but they're the difference between a good team and a championship contender. And even if they pull off that scenario, even if they keep Mitchell and Hull while losing only Cunningham, their depth is still compromised. They'd be filling out the rest of the roster with minimum contracts and undrafted free agents. They'd be hoping to find diamonds in the rough while competing against teams with more balanced salary structures. It's possible, but it's playing on hard mode.
Wow. I knew that was, look, even without a new CBA, the way things were constructed, I knew if you gave Mitchell a Supermax, that salary was good. That salary.
But here's what really keeps Indiana's front office up at night. This isn't a problem that goes away. This is structural. This is baked into the new CBA framework, and it gets progressively worse as time goes on. Let's game out the timeline. Summer 2025. Right now, they're scrambling to keep this year's free agents. Kelsey Mitchell gets the max. They fight to keep Lexie Hull and Sophie Cunningham, probably losing one or both. Summer 2026. Aaliyah Boston's extension kicks in. Another max contract hits the books. Now you've got 2 max players and Caitlin Clark still on her rookie deal. But the roster around them is even thinner because you're paying Boston Supermax money. Summer 2027. Caitlin Clark's extension. Now you've got 3 Supermax contracts consuming over 60% of your entire salary cap. At that point, you're not building a championship roster. You're building a top-heavy team with 3 stars and a bunch of minimum salary players hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. That's not sustainable. That's not how you build a dynasty. That's how you waste generational talent. And here's the thing that makes this even more frustrating. The WNBA and the Players Association are still negotiating this CBA. The numbers we're discussing, the $5.65 million cap, the $1 million max contracts, those aren't finalized yet. They could change. The cap could go higher. The max salary percentage could come down. There are scenarios where this problem becomes more manageable. But even if the cap increases, the fundamental issue remains. Max salaries will increase proportionally. Average salaries will increase proportionally. The squeeze will still happen, just with bigger numbers. Unless the CBA includes some kind of mechanism to help teams keep their core together, some version of the NBA's bird rights or designated player exceptions, small market teams like Indiana are going to face impossible choices. Think about what the league is risking here. The Indiana Fever just became one of the WNBA's biggest success stories. They went from lottery team to playoff contender in one season, they sold out every home game, they generated unprecedented media attention. Caitlin Clark's presence turned casual fans into diehards and brought new audiences to women's basketball. This is exactly the kind of franchise growth story the league should be celebrating and protecting. Instead, the new CBA structure threatens to dismantle it before it reaches its peak. And it's not just Indiana. This is going to happen to other teams too. Any franchise that successfully builds through the draft, that develops young stars into superstars, is going to hit this same salary cap wall. You draft well, you develop talent, you build chemistry, and then you're forced to break it up because you can't afford to keep everyone together. The NBA figured this out decades ago. They created mechanisms to reward teams for drafting and developing players. Bird rights allow teams to exceed the cap to resign their own players. The designated player exception lets teams offer supermax deals to homegrown stars. These rules exist specifically to prevent the exact scenario the Fever are facing right now. The WNBA needs something similar. They need a way for teams to keep their cores intact without sacrificing all roster depth. Maybe it's higher cap exceptions for players you drafted. Maybe it's a luxury tax system that allows teams to spend over the cap with financial penalties instead of hard restrictions. Maybe it's a franchise tag system like the NFL uses. Whatever the mechanism, something needs to exist to prevent competitive rosters from being destroyed by their own success. Because right now, the message the CBA sends to front offices is perverse. Don't be too good at drafting. Don't develop too many stars. Don't build too much chemistry. Because if you do all those things right, you'll just end up in salary cap hell, watching your best players leave or your depth evaporate. And let's be clear about who suffers most in this scenario. It's not the stars. Kelsey Mitchell will get her max contract, whether it's in Indiana or somewhere else. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston will get their Supermax deals when the time comes. The players at the top of the market will be fine. It's the Lexie Hulls and Sophie Cunninghams of the world who get squeezed out. The solid starters and key role players who deserve security but become salary cap casualties. It's also the fans who suffer. Fever fans who bought season tickets, who showed up every game, who invested emotionally in this team, they're the ones who'll watch Sophie Cunningham in a different uniform next season. They're the ones who'll see Lexie Hull potentially playing elsewhere if Indiana can't match an offer. They did everything right as a fan base. They supported the team through rebuilding. They embraced the new era. And their reward is watching the roster get torn apart by financial constraints. So what's the solution here? What can Indiana actually do? In the short term, not much. They're operating within the constraints of whatever CBA gets finalized. They'll make the best decisions they can with the resources available. They'll prioritize keeping their stars together and hope they can find cheap depth that overperforms. Long-term, though, this is a league-wide problem that requires a league-wide solution. The next round of CBA negotiations needs to address competitive balance and roster continuity. The Players Association needs to recognize that while higher salaries are important, mechanisms that allow good teams to stay together benefit everyone. Stars want to play with other good players. Role players want to be on winning teams. Fans want to watch competitive basketball with familiar faces. The current proposal creates a system where parity is enforced through financial destruction rather than competitive balance. That's not healthy for the league. That's not healthy for the sport. And it's definitely not healthy for franchises like Indiana that just spent years building something special. Here's the question Fever fans need to ask themselves. Was last season's success worth it, if this is the price? If keeping Kelsey Mitchell means losing Sophie Cunningham? If extending Aaliyah Boston means operating with minimum depth? If paying Caitlin Clark what she's worth means you can't afford anyone else? Was it worth becoming relevant? Or would you rather have stayed mediocre with a balanced, affordable roster? That's not a fair question to ask. Obviously, you don't choose mediocrity. You don't pass on generational talent. You don't tank on purpose just to avoid salary cap problems. But it highlights how broken this system is. Success shouldn't be punished. Building a winner shouldn't trigger a roster apocalypse. The Indiana Fever are about to become a test case for how the new CBA affects competitive teams. Every decision they make this offseason, every contract they sign or don't sign, every player they keep or lose, that's going to set precedent for how other teams navigate these same constraints. And if Indiana can't figure out how to keep this core together, if they're forced to make devastating choices between star power and depth, that sends a chilling message to every other franchise in the league. So yeah, Fever fans should be worried, not because their front office is incompetent, not because their stars don't want to be there, but because the financial structure of the new CBA might make it impossible to keep everyone together no matter how badly everyone involved wants it to work. And that's a problem that goes way beyond one team or one offseason. That's a structural flaw that could define the next era of WNBA basketball. What do you think Indiana should prioritize? Keep the stars together at all costs and hope minimum salary players can fill the gaps? Or sacrifice one max player to maintain better depth across the roster? Because those might be the only two options on the table. Let me know in the comments and make sure you subscribe, because this CBA situation is going to dominate the offseason and we'll be breaking down every development as it happens.